Two siblings are mysteriously transported into a black and white TV world. But when the townspeople decide to throw them in jail, will they escape or uncover the town's darkest secret? Watch the video until the end. In California, twin siblings David and Jennifer lead very different lives. David spends his evenings watching an old black and white 1950s sitcom called Pleasantville. He knows every line by heart and is completely hooked on it. Whenever he hears his divorced parents arguing about custody, he just turns up the TV, choosing to escape rather than deal with it. One evening, after their mom has left, Jennifer plans to watch a concert on TV with her date, but David wants to watch a marathon of Pleasantville. The twins argue over the remote, which ends up falling to the floor and breaking. Just then, the doorbell rings, and Jennifer answers it. A repairman stands outside, claiming to have come to fix the TV, even though no one called him. Confused, Jennifer lets him in, noticing his old-fashioned van. With lightning flashing outside, the repairman hands David a strange new remote, saying it has a little extra oomph. Before leaving, he makes a comment about Jennifer's date, which leaves her wondering how he knew about that. Afterward, David uses the new remote to turn on the TV. As he and Jennifer fight over it again, the characters on Pleasantville are also fighting over a book. Suddenly, the remote glows, and in an instant, the twins are sucked into the television. They find themselves in the black and white world of Pleasantville, even dressed like the show's characters. At that moment, George, the father from the show, calls them to remind them it's time for school. It's clear the twins have taken the place of the sitcom's siblings, and everyone calls them by the characters' names. The TV repairman reappears, telling the twins that they're a miracle, and this happened because David knows the show so well. He even shows them a scene from the real world where Jennifer's date arrives but leaves when no one answers the door. Frustrated, David and Jennifer demand to go back, but the repairman gets offended by their lack of appreciation for his gift and vanishes. The twins try to hide the remote, but their sitcom mother, Betty, insists they sit down for a massive breakfast full of greasy food. Afterward, they head to school, where David recognizes all the characters from the show. Jennifer starts freaking out, but David reassures her that they need to blend in until the repairman returns to get them out. Suddenly, a fire truck pulls up and 5 firemen hop out, but instead of going to a fire, they're just there to get a cat out of a tree. While Jennifer complains about their situation, a high school boy named Skip says hello to her. She immediately takes a liking to him, feeling a bit better about being stuck in this world. Later in geography class, the teacher describes the few streets in town, and Jennifer asks what's outside of Pleasantville. Her question confuses everyone. The teacher simply replies that when you reach the end of Main Street, it just loops back to the beginning. Meanwhile, David joins the basketball team. In the real world, he's terrible at sports, but here he can make every shot without missing. The rest of the team also scores every time, revealing that this world runs on TV logic. Skip approaches David to ask if he should ask Jennifer out. Recognizing this as part of a specific episode, David tells him to wait. Skip gets upset and misses his next shot, leaving everyone shocked. David quickly realizes that if they make decisions that are out of character, it could disrupt the entire world. Panicking, he rushes to tell Jennifer to go out with Skip. Jennifer shares her own strange experiences. All the books in the library are blank, and when she tried to light a tissue on fire, it wouldn't burn. This explains why the firemen only rescue cats. There's no real danger here. Just then, Jennifer's giggling friends show up to tell her that Skip plans to ask her out and give her his pin. Finally, Jennifer agrees to play along with the script. Later at home, Jennifer gets ready for her date with Skip, complaining about how conservative the clothes are. David reassures her, telling her not to worry, as nothing inappropriate happens in this world. Jennifer, disappointed, just rolls her eyes as David heads to his job at the soda shop, where he's greeted by his boss, Bill. Bill felt lost, wiping the counter aimlessly because David was late. When David finally arrived, he told Bill that he could start making fries, even if the napkins weren't set up yet. Later that evening, the soda shop filled with teenagers, including Skip and Jennifer, who were on a date. Skip, feeling shy, was hesitant even to hold hands, which left Jennifer bored. She excused herself to the bathroom, only to discover that there weren't any toilets. Meanwhile, Bill visited David's house, proud that he managed to close up the soda shop all on his own for the first time. However, when Betty walked by and greeted him, Bill froze, clearly smitten by her. Later, Skip dropped Jennifer off at home, but David noticed something strange. Skip seemed different, and a rose in the garden had turned red. The following day, David searched for the repairman on TV, but only found the Weather Channel, which always reported perfect weather during basketball practice. But when the team tried shooting hoops, they all missed. Concerned, David confronted Jennifer, warning her that she was messing up the town's balance. But Jennifer argued that the people weren't truly happy before. Just then, a girl passed by blowing bubblegum, and it was pink, a sign that things were changing. The basketball team got worse, furniture stores began selling double beds, and more people started seeing colors appear in the town. Despite searching the TV, David couldn't find the repairman. One night at the soda shop, he noticed how much the teenagers had changed. They were now enjoying rock and roll music. Bill, hiding behind the counter, confessed to David that he hated his job and didn't know what to do since they had run out of cheeseburgers. David told him that sometimes people don't like their jobs, which made Bill reflect on how sad that was. Bill then showed David a collection of photos of murals he had painted, revealing his real passion for art. At the barbershop, George and his friends discussed the basketball team's recent losing streak. However, Mayor Bob insisted it was impossible since their team never loses. Meanwhile, at Betty's house, she and her friends were playing cards. One woman mentioned that her daughter's tongue had turned pink and that the color was spreading to her lips. Another mentioned seeing a green car outside the ice cream shop. As Betty listened, she picked up her cards and was shocked to see they were now in color. Later that night, Betty asked Jennifer about Lover's Lane, and Jennifer explained the facts of life to her. Tree outside to catch fire. Alarmed, David rushed to the fire station, shouting fire, but the firefighters didn't react until he yelled cat, and they sprang into action. The firefighters rush to David's house, but they have no idea how to handle the fire. Seeing this, David grabs the hose from their truck and puts out the flames himself while the neighbors gather to watch. The next day, David is honored with a medal for his bravery. After the ceremony, Margaret surprises him with homemade cookies, which catches David off guard because she usually likes someone else in the series. To the soda shop, when he steps inside the shop, he finds more colorful teens listening to jazz, but they all stop and stare at him when he walks in. They ask David how he knew to put out the fire, and he explains that where he used to live, that's what firefighters did. The teens are curious and ask where he lived, and when David tells them it was outside of Pleasantville, they freak out. David starts telling them stories about the world beyond Pleasantville. One teen suddenly remembers reading about a river in Huckleberry Finn and pulls out the book. Surprisingly, the book isn't empty anymore. Jennifer explains that while she was telling others the plot of the novel, the words appeared on the pages. However, it stopped halfway because she hadn't finished reading it. The teens eagerly ask David to tell them how the story ends, and when he does, the rest of the pages magically fill in. Excited by this discovery, the teens bring out more books for David to help them complete. Soon, long lines of teenagers are forming at the library, eager to check out more books. Meanwhile, the men at the barbershop begin to worry about all the changes happening in their town. Bob isn't happy with the direction things are going, so he visits George to complain about things like double beds and people quitting their jobs. He then invites George to join the Pleasantville Chamber of Commerce, and George happily agrees. To celebrate, George calls his wife Betty, asking her to prepare snacks, but she doesn't respond. David volunteers to look for Betty and finds her crying at the kitchen sink because she's become colorful. She's scared that her husband will judge her for it. David grabs her makeup and helps her cover up the colors so she can appear gray again. This way, she can go outside, since George never bothered to actually get up and check on her. The next day at the soda shop, David gives Bill a book on famous paintings. The beauty of the artwork deeply affects Bill, and he laments that he'll never be able to paint like that because he can't see colors. Later, David nervously asks Margaret out on a date, and she agrees. Overjoyed, David rushes home, only to be startled when he sees the repairman on the TV screen. The repairman is considering sending the twins back to their original world because they're changing Pleasantville too much, but David simply turns off the TV. David checks on Jennifer and finds her reading a book by D.H. Lawrence. She's confused as to why she hasn't turned colorful yet, and David suggests it might be because it's not just physical acts that trigger the transformation. Later, David and Margaret go to Lover's Lane for their date. Almost everything in this area is colorful, and most of the couples are reading books to each other while gaining their colors. Margaret feeds David some fruit she picked from a tree, including a fresh apple. Meanwhile, Betty walks through town and spots a large painting in the window of the soda shop. She goes inside and finds Bill painting in a new artistic style. He invites her to take a closer look at his work and shows her some famous art pieces from the book David gave him. When Betty sees a woman crying in one of the paintings, she starts crying too and accidentally smears some of her makeup, revealing her true color. Back at home, Jennifer is still reading when she starts to feel cold, so she puts on a sweater. She also realizes she's struggling with some of the words and decides to put on her glasses. It's as if she's slowly becoming like the people of Pleasantville. Just then, Skip throws pebbles at Jennifer's window, reminding her of their date. But Jennifer brushes him off, saying she's busy studying. Moments later, a thunderstorm, the first ever in Pleasantville, begins. George arrives home and calls for Betty, but she's nowhere to be found and hasn't left dinner for him either. At the soda shop, Bill is busy painting Betty. When she gets up to watch the thunderstorm outside, she looks at Bill's latest painting and is amazed by what she sees. At Lover's Lane, it starts raining heavily, and everyone panics, rushing to a nearby gazebo for shelter. David reassures them that rain isn't dangerous and walks out, laughing at the experience. George, upset that his usual routine is disrupted, also steps out into the rain. Frustrated, he heads to the bowling alley, where Bob and the other men are shocked by George's story. One of the guys shows a burn mark on his shirt from an iron, saying his wife has also been distracted. The men are upset about losing control over their wives and agree to work together to stop the changes happening in the town. The next morning, Pleasantville sees its first ever rainbow. Bill, Betty, and the soda shop have all gained color, and at home, Jennifer is now colorful too. Margaret, who stayed at Lover's Lane, has also turned colorful, but David remains in black and white. A town meeting is announced to address the changes. George tries to get Betty to come, but she refuses. They argue, with George insisting the color is temporary and that wives should always prepare meals for their husbands. But Betty has had enough. She tells him she's left meals for him in the fridge and teaches him how to reheat them, then she leaves. Elsewhere, David gives Margaret her first umbrella, which was once a prop from the theater. At that moment, a thug drives by, reminds them about the town meeting, and mocks Margaret for being colorful. At the meeting, Mayor Bob talks about the concerns people have about the colors and proposes they decide what is pleasant and what isn't, suggesting that they keep those things separate. Back at the soda shop, Bill is scraping his mural off the window when he sees Betty approaching with a suitcase. The next day, many stores put up signs saying no colors. David walks by the television store, where he notices the repairman on a screen. The repairman wants to send David back to his world, but David refuses and walks away. Suddenly, David sees a group of high school boys harassing Betty. He rushes over and punches one of them, which scares the boys since they've never seen violence before, and they run away. David realizes he has finally gained color, and Betty hugs him, happy for him. Back at the soda shop, the crowd has become violent, and someone throws a rock through the window, shattering it. The crowd cheers, and the violence spreads. People start wrecking the shop, breaking taking furniture, supplies, and other paintings. That night, the Gray people begin burning books in protest. Skip tries to burn Jennifer's book, but she grabs it from him and runs off. She meets up with David and the girls, and they head to the soda shop, where they find Bill cleaning up the damage. The group immediately offers to help. Soon after, Bob holds another town meeting, urging the citizens to create a code of conduct. Later, David reads the new rules to the colorful people at the soda shop. The rules stop vandalism and encourage polite behavior, but also call for closing down Lover's Lane and the public library. Things like rock and jazz music, umbrellas, large beds, and colorful paint are banned. Everyone feels uneasy and is too afraid to turn on the jukebox, but David switches it on and encourages everyone to fight for their rights. That night, all the colorful people sleep in the soda shop. David promises Bill that he will paint again, and together they come up with an idea. The next morning, the newspaper boy is surprised to find David and Bill sleeping under a newly painted mural that shows images of things prohibited in the town. A crowd soon gathers to express their disapproval, and David and Bill are arrested. Later, George visits David in jail, eating olives straight from the jar. He admits that Betty left him 3 days ago, and since his routine has been disrupted, he can't even tell what day it is. George wonders what went wrong, but David tells him that it's just how people change over time. During David and Bill's trial, they're accused of using banned paint colors. David asks for a lawyer, but Bob refuses, saying they want to keep things nice. Angry David gives a passionate speech about what truly matters in life, explaining that there's no real difference between black and white people and those with color. He turns to George and asks if he misses something more than just the household duties, making him look at his wife Betty. As George gazes at her, he starts crying and admits that she looks more beautiful than ever, causing him to turn into color. As David talks more about the value of feelings, others in the courtroom also start to turn colorful. Bob becomes furious, but David provokes him until Bob snaps and gains color too. Everyone gasps, and Betty hands Bob a mirror to make him face the truth. Horrified, Bob flees the room, and someone in the courtroom tells the crowd to step outside. When they do, they are amazed to see the whole town has transformed into vibrant colors. He walks to a television store where he sees that they are now showing images of the outside world, also in color. Later, Jennifer tells David that she's decided to stay in this world for a while so she can attend college. David promises to visit her soon, and they share a hug before she leaves on a bus. Afterward, David returns home, and Margaret asks him not to forget her while handing him a sandwich. Betty also gives him a cardigan and tells him she's proud of him. The women watch as David uses the remote to finally return to his world. Back in his living room, David finds that the Pleasantville Marathon is about to begin, but instead of watching, he turns off the TV and goes to check on his mom, who is crying in the kitchen. She shares her worries with him, and David comforts her, surprising her with how wise he has become. Meanwhile, in Pleasantville, life is now full of color and possibility. Betty and George sit on a bench talking about their future, and Bill soon joins them. Subscribe for popcorn. We are racing towards 500 subscribers.